I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. This is our Friday edition. It's the Healing Circle, and we're glad to have you along with us today. I see in our chat so far in our program today, our colleague Lisa Clemens, Mother's Love. Lisa, so good to see you. How you doing? And you're on mute.
I'm doing good.
Okay, so good to see you. And I see the esteemed Oliver Williams. Oliver Williams, how are you? Glad to see you here.
Good to see you too.
Let me introduce you to Brenda Lyle Gray on my team. Brenda is the reporter, columnist who writes the stories from this and other programs throughout the week. Brenda and I tell people, are kindergarten classmates. We grew up together in Kansas City. So kindergarten was a minute ago, but it's so glad to be in this uh, opportunity to collaborate at this point in our careers. So Brenda, good to see you. How you doing?
I'm fine.
Good.
Glad
Well,
to be here.
glad
And
that you.
welcome, Mr. Williams and Lisa. I've heard a lot about mother's love, so
Thank you.
congratulations on all your good work.
Thank you.
We need to clone you.
They're going to get just as tired as I am, but
I
okay.
bet. That's okay. God knows your heart, honey.
Thank you.
I think John Turnipseed is in the backstage trying to get in, so we're trying to get his video, and we're hoping that our friend and leader Spike Moss will join the program as well. But let me start with Lisa. Lisa, you and I are working as part of the African American Child Wellness Institute initiative to focus on mental health and healing in our community, particularly while and as a consequence of the ongoing disparities that our community experiences, uh, and also the gun violence and other domestic violence that comes out of that, the violence we experience at the hands of law enforcement and that we inflict upon each other, and then all of that inside this environment of COVID-19. So let me start by asking you to talk about a mother's love, your vision, your background, and your work. And Oliver Williams, Dr. Williams, I'll bring the same question to you momentarily. Uh, Sister Lisa, go ahead.
So
Lisa,
our
let me tell you, I'm so happy to be in this conversation with you because we've been talking about making this happen for a while. So when I see you, I can't help but be overjoyed by the chance to talk directly with you on this platform.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, it's hard to talk about what we do because we kind of get pulled in so many different directions. Our goal was to reach out to change the narrative for mothers and daughters because that's the group that's at the fewest tables. That's the group that people talk about the least, even though we find that 70% of households are headed by single mothers, especially Black mothers. We take absolutely nothing away from our Black fathers, whether they're in the home or not. But we do need to be recognized that, our young daughters are in trouble out here and no one wants to talk about that. So we did start out as mothers, trying to reach mothers and daughters, but now we have fathers as part of our team because we realize that if you want to change a narrative, you have to change the narrative of the whole family. So that's what we've been doing, and we're doing that on the educational level. We're doing that with mentoring. We're doing that with trauma and grief care. I say this, Al. I come from being a police officer. I This is the hardest job I ever had right here.
Even harder than being a police officer.
This is harder than being a police officer. You got to kind of do your job, and there's just more calls, more calls, more calls, and you try to double back and talk to people again, but you don't always have the time to do that. But in this one, we stay the course with these families for the long haul, and some of it's been years that we've been working with these same families. So it's a long process, but I love it. I love doing it.
Let me ask you to go in on the key points you've already talked about. I'll just throw them out and you can just respond as you will, Lisa. Uh, the question of violence between and among Black people. How does that show up where you are, and what are you able to do in response to that, either de-escalating or helping people get tools, strategies to not be in that situation?
We absolutely de-escalate a lot of that. I mean, my team members have been caught in the middle of the gun violence that's happening in the community, and just within the last week, two separate incidents that they've had to cover babies and make sure that our kids are safe, meaning our own personal children are
Tell
safe as
tell
well.
what happened. One was on up in North High, right? Up at North Commons.
Yeah, the first one was Broadway and Lindale, and we had just had an emergency training for de-escalation because anytime something happens with boots on the ground organizations, I always use that as a teaching moment for my team. So we came in to reinforce the value systems of a mother's love and how we treat people, especially people who are more vulnerable. So we had just finished our training and left Cub Foods Community Center in North Minneapolis, and I couldn't fit one of my team members and her family into my car, plus their double strollers. So she decided they'll get on the bus. And they got to Broadway, Lindale, where Merwin's liquor store is, to get on the bus. And shots fired. She threw her 7-month-old baby to the ground and laid on top of her. He ran to a corner with their two sons, who are no older than 5 years old, and threw his body to cover his sons. And when it was all over, 30 rounds had been fired with shell casings landing around where she was laying with her baby. And it was traumatizing for her, but it really just made her angry, and made her want to fight even harder in our community. And then the second incident was at North Commons Park, where two people on mopeds decided to have a shootout.
Before you go on, were there injuries on the Lindale incident?
No injuries on either of these
Okay.
incidents, and we thank God for that.
Mhm.
But the second one, our team was getting out of the wading pool with our kids and were coming around. They heard the commotion, didn't know what it was, but they were coming around the building, and the staff at North Commons was telling everybody, get in the building, get in the building. There had been shots fired, so they all went in. And North Commons staff is so amazing. I mean, just amazing. They made sure that everybody was in the building, everybody was safe, and until families came to pick them up. My niece's car took a round in the rear passenger's door and
Oh,
went all the way through to the rear driver's door. And the sad part about that, even saying it makes me emotional, that's where each of her twins sit in her car. I just happened to keep her kids that day. So I'm glad that, and they stayed a little later at North Commons Park than they normally do, or she would have already been in the car with her kids. But that's just another tragedy that would have taken place with our kids in North Minneapolis.
so that's happening inside the family, inside the Black community family. Then
Mhm.
we have the question that is sort of typified by our discussions on George Floyd, the question of police overreaction or illegal action that results in danger, damage, death of Black people.
Right.
So, on the one hand, we talk about how we do each other, but then we also have to be doubly conscious of what the society, the institutions around us do to us as well. What are your thoughts there? And I'm particularly interested in your thoughts because you have worked in both sides. You have been a law enforcement officer. That's your background, and so you know more than most of us about the dynamic, the pressure, the training, and the impact and intent of officers.
I think it's both ways. It's not any different than what we experience in the community. I think people forget that cops too are human. We are held to a higher standard, and that should be our first priority, to remember that we're held to a higher standard. But there are cops who are human. But I can't excuse any behavior that goes outside of policing our community with the utmost respect for the people that live in that community. So I can't make excuses for them. But I also can't make excuses for the behaviors that we're seeing in the community. To make excuses and continue to just say it's poverty, or that is one part of it, but that's not the greatest part of it. These are personal choices on many levels that we are making in our community and jeopardizing the safety of everybody in it, men, women, and children. I am disappointed in any conversation of abolish the police. I personally work real hard in the community. So if someone had lumped me under an umbrella and said, I don't even care that you worked hard in this community, that you gave of yourself and was willing to die for the community you served, but we still want to abolish all of you because of the actions of a few. I take offense to that. I do think this chief has been treated like crap, if I'm being nice on this call, been treated like crap, not just by white America, but by Black America. I sat through many chiefs. In fact, one of them um, was a racist, and that was confirmed that he was a racist. But we didn't come out against him. Janae Harto was the first female
Oh, so I think we lost you, Lisa. Let me, we'll get back to her in a second. Oh, there you are. You're back now. Go ahead. We see you. I don't hear you though, Lisa. You might need to reset your settings and check your volume again. I want to move over and come back to you. Thank you for that information. And Kelvin Curia, if you're monitoring, Spike Moss is in the waiting room and Dr. B is in the waiting room. So would you make sure that you bring them onto on camera so that we can expand the conversation? Kelvin, please acknowledge that you got this instruction. Let me turn to Dr. Oliver Williams. And Dr. Williams, you are a specialist in the question of family abuse. And thank you for being here. And I'll throw the same questions out to you that I've brought to Lisa. One is, how do we look at this question, this history of violence within our family, of how we are victimizing each other? Then, while we look at that, what is our appropriate way to understand and assess the structural violence against us by the state, as represented by the police department, as represented by policies that marginalize and depress and derail our vision, our hope, our assessment of ourselves, of our own dignity and of our own humanity? How do we do that? Those two things. So the George Floyd is one thing that talks about the macro, but the shootings on Lindale and Broadway and the shootings in North Commons represent this personal inside family uh, um, devaluation, or I don't know the right word for it. So let me ask you to respond to those two things, and in the process talk about your work and the organization that you bring to the solution side of this equation.
Well, I've been working in the field of domestic violence for a long time, and I'm glad that Ms. Clemens made the comment about looking at those issues separately. What you need to do in terms of dealing with law enforcement is one set of issues, but being able to deal with the challenge of violence within families and also within our community is another set of things that we need to take a look at. So we've got to be able to have both sets of conversations, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we will. Someone was asking me. I was at a conference a couple years ago, and someone asked a question. And so we're talking about Africa, and as we're having conversations about violence in Africa, the expectation was that I would endorse a comment that says all of it has to do with the white man. And I'm saying if we took a look at it from that perspective, we'd miss all the violence that existed within Africa itself. So they asked where. And I started ticking off a list of countries where there's violence that happened within those countries. And so, Africa is a continent. It's not a country by itself. And there's 52 different countries, and there are challenges within each one. Well, I say the same thing about dealing with the African American family, that there's violence that exists within our families. We have to be able to talk about violence against women. We have to be able to talk about youth violence. We have to talk about violence that men do to one another. And so when we have the conversation, we need to talk about it in the context of which type of violence are you talking about.
Can everybody mute your mics, please?
And so have the conversation, identify the type of violence that you want to have the conversation about, and then there's a focus on within each area. And so that's what my remark would be, is that there's a strategy for each one that you have to develop some attention to if you want to be able to respond to it. Al, your mic is off. Al, you're muted.
Al, you're muted. We can't hear you, brother. And Spike, you need to mute.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to do. I was saying, Spike, can you mute your microphone? Because we're getting feedback through your microphone. So there should be a button on your screen, a picture of the microphone. Just hit the mute button, and that will eliminate the feedback.
No, I can't.
Do you
There
see
you go.
it?
No.
Here it comes now.
There should be a
Good.
picture.
You got
there we
it.
go. Perfect. So, Brother Oliver, go ahead. Then I'm going to go to Spike next.
Yeah, I just think that you have to identify the area that you want to focus on. And if you're going to talk about violence against women, that's the strategy that needs to be focused on. If you're going to talk about community violence and youth violence, that's another area that we need to give some attention to and develop some strategies to be able to focus on that. If you're going to talk about youth, that's another area that you need to talk about, and also recognize that there's a strategy for young boys and young men compared to what you would do with young women. So Ms. Clemens is correct when she talks about dealing with mothers and daughters, but also dealing with men and young men is another thing that we need to take a look at, not to put it all together. It seems like one strategy is going to focus on everything. Also dealing with the issue of trauma. Sometimes issues repeat themselves as a consequence of what people have been exposed to. And also triggers for people who've been exposed to a certain type of violence, and then they repeat it later when they get older based on what they experienced. And that trauma is emotional, it's biological, it's psychological, and that we've got to find ways to get communities to be able to heal about it. But one thing is coming together to have those conversations, and also developing resources within the community so people will know where to go, and that we can't expect organizations to heal everything, but they can be a resource to be able to assist people in the process of doing it. And we've got to rely on that, but also feel comfortable with it as well.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. You know, our theme today is Kujichagulia, which is self-determination. And the text is, if Black lives matter, why are we killing ourselves? And I'm going to bring in I call him the general, the commander-in-chief, Spike Moss, in just a second to reflect on and respond to and issue the challenges to our community of what we need to be doing right now, what we've been doing, what has worked and what hasn't worked. But before I do that, I wanted to bring in Dr. B, who's my co-host and who's the leader of the African American Child Wellness Institute initiative that is sponsoring this program. Dr. B, good afternoon. I'm going to pass the talking stick to you and then ask you to sort of reflect on this theme from the point of view of your experience, your knowledge, and your training, and your spirit, and also then pass the talking stick to Spike Moss. Dr. B, I'm handing the talking stick to you.
Thank you, brother. I got the stick. And I'm glad to be here. I'm just so pleased with the panelists that we have today and this topic about self-determination. And to me, that means that we as a people have a sense of agency. We have power and control over some things in our lives, maybe not everything, but some things. And one thing we can do is choose whether we're going to use our hands to hug or hit. We can choose whether we're going to use them for raising babies or killing them and pulling a gun to squeeze. So we have choices. We can choose whether we're going to get a shot, the COVID vaccine, or if we're going to shoot other people with a pistol. So some of these things are rambling around, and we keep saying Black Lives Matter. And it shows me how much that we don't even value ourselves. So when I think about Black Lives Matter, and we say it over and over, to me, it's an opportunity to have a confirmation and an affirmation of our own humanity as people, that our lives matter. And we say it just like we do affirmations to ourselves. We speak it into existence that our lives matter. And I would like to challenge gang leaders, people who feel isolated and alone, who've been abused and angry. I want them to start saying Black Lives Matter and look in the mirror every day, 4 or 5 times. And when you go and you look in that mirror and you do it for a week, let's meet up again on Healing Circle and see how you feel when you start looking at your own humanity. Because when you cannot dehumanize someone else without losing part of who you are and your divine appointment as a human being. You can't do that. They don't go together. So that's what I think the theme is about, affirming our own right to be. And with that, I'm going to pass the talking stick to Brother Spike, and I'm going to invite you to unmute yourself and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Good. Interesting topic. Let me first say about Black Lives Matter. That's a group that came together, wasn't paying attention to what was going on in the last 15 years. Or they never would have used a catchphrase like Black Lives Matter when we have shown for the last 15 years we do not matter to each other. One of the things that happened to me when I went to New Jersey, I went from a Saturday to Saturday. I spoke in 4 prisons a day. I said to these young black men, 14 to 19 years old, 10, 20, 30 years to life. I'm not upset at how many of you are in this penitentiary. I'm not upset to how young you are, and I'm not upset to how many years you have. I'm upset because the majority of you are here for doing something to somebody who looked like you. It hasn't mattered for a long time. I went to my first gang conference in 1968 in St. Louis, Missouri, organized by the Viceroys from Chicago. It has not changed. Now, one of the things, because you're a mental person, you would understand what I'm about to say. You mess and deal with mental illness. Years ago in 1998, Ronald Reagan went on television and made an announcement. If you can go to the restroom yourself and feed yourself, we should no longer take care of you in mental institutions. We emptied those institutions. They were on the highways and byways and under bridges, and they began to make children mentally ill. Shortly following that, a white man went on TV and said, 30 years from now, these kids will suffer from a new drug that's coming called crack cocaine. It's going to create learning managed issues. You can't sit still, anger managed issues. 30 some days from now, you will see it 30 some years from crack cocaine. At the end of 2020, America announced in January, one out of every 5 Americans is now mentally ill. If you do a study, that means 2 or 3 in 5. Then we lace the community with the most dangerous drugs in the history of delivering drugs to people, and especially Black people, who too many are mentally ill. Then we have the largest population of dysfunctional parents, man and woman. And we got the largest population of single moms trying to figure it out, who haven't been taught to be mothers or women. And then you flood our community with guns and bullets, which would put us right where we're at. When you say Black Lives Matter, Highway 90 comes from Chicago and runs right into Minnesota. Listen to this, Al. 2012 is Chicago. They killed 849. 2013, 716. 2014, 772. 2015, 904. 2016, 1,424. 2017, 1,301. 2018, 969. 2019, 844. 2020, 1,007. 2021, 1,299. Last year, when they finished alone, they had shot 4,330 people, killed 769. This year already, go back 4 months, they were up to 1,386 people, killed 252. They went up 24%. This figure, these goals, you can count all the way across America of Black people killing Black people. You know, from Black history, Al, the Klan has been in existence at least 172, 73 years. We have now killed more Black people than the Klan has in 170 some years. The Vietnam War went for 5 years. We were 7% of the front line. We have now shot and wounded more Blacks than the Vietnam War, and we have now killed more than the Vietnam War, while we have the nerve to utter Black Lives Matter. We're over 200 people shot already in the Twin City, not including the ones we killed. We ended up last year in Minnesota. We shot more than 1,000 people between St. Paul and Minneapolis while we lie about Black Lives Matter. When the young man was choked on the East Coast and he hollered, "I can't breathe," at that moment that he went down and lost his life for selling cigarettes on the street, we had already shot and killed 389 people in that city, and we had shot and wounded 2,252 people. When the young man in Chicago hit the street from a hail of bullets, 16 bullets, we hit the street howling Black Lives Matter. At that moment, we had already shot and killed 587 people, Black, and wounded 2,236 people, and ended up at the end of that year, I got it here somewhere, we had shot up 4,000 people in that city when we ended up in the end of that year. So Black lives don't matter. Now, here's why. You don't have a father figure, and if you do, he might be dysfunctional on chemical or alcohol. You don't have a mother figure, she might be dysfunction, she might be on drugs or alcohol herself, or in the street trying to get a man. Who's raising the baby? When I got a call to go to City View grade school, we think we have a gang problem. They had a 10-year-old boy there. His father was the leader of the Bloods in Little Rock, Arkansas. The day before I got there, he flexed his power and had all those kids come to school in their black and red blood colors. He had organized that tough. Mahmoud over at Seed Academy said, "Spike, I might have 1 or 2 kids in a gang." I agreed to come. We put them all in the gym. All of them was in the gang. Mahmoud fell against the wall because he didn't have a clue. Coach McKenzie called. "I might have some players on my team doing a gang. Would you come up and speak to them in the gym?" I'm not the police. I'm not the FBI. We're going to be brothers. How many of y'all in the gang? All of them went up. How of y'all lost somebody in your family or a friend to gunfire? All the hands went up. We're moving at that pace because we're now behind the 8 ball. We're no longer in front of it. We're killing at a pace we've never killed. And the sickest thing I want to say to the doctor there, and she can study it and maybe tell us, but we look like we headed to the only way this will end, they will kill off each other. Only way this will end. Now, let me say this, if you have any questions for me. Right now in my hand, let me give you California. They jumped from 247, 2019, to 229 this moment. In Georgia, they jumped from 99 to 90. Then you got Illinois. They jumped from 501 to 471. Already and the year ain't over. Louisiana, they jumped from 120 to 400 and something, and we're not done. Michigan, they jumped from 272 to 186 already, and we're not done. And then you come down to Missouri. St. Louis jumped from 194 all the way to 111, and Kansas City jumped from 151 all the way to 150. Nebraska, small, 23, moved 20 already. New York, 314, have already jumped to 468. All the way over to Ohio, 123, right now at 88. Come down here to Pennsylvania, 346, all the way to 499. Get down to Texas, 225, all the way up to 282, and brought along with them right now 321 they've jumped to. Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, 225, already at 283, and the new figure in is 321. We are massacring our people in every city, every state, the same way. When you ask the question, I thank God that when we were young people, we had a young man that lived here named Mahmoud El-Khadi, who told us and taught us the importance of being African Americans and being proud people, and taught us we were not the N-word. We were not any way where we supposed to disrespect our women and call them B's and H's. We were supposed to call them queens. That teaching disappeared with this generation, where mothers don't even call the child by the God-given name they gave them. They call them little N's and little F's. Where mothers are not home when you come home to greet you or cook for you or put you to bed. Mothers don't get up and see you off to school to see if you had your bath, wash your face, brush your teeth. When you get that savage as a people, you're going to get what's coming to you when it comes back around. It is not normal, Al, for a black woman to live 30% of her life without a normal relationship with a black man. There's consequences you'll pay for that. It's not normal for that boy and that girl to grow up with no relationship with their father. You will pay for that. It's the father who gives the girl what she needs in terms of her credibility and her confidence. He's the one that sets up and validates her. That's my queen. That's my baby girl. She's cute. She's pretty. All of that's gone. We need to stop telling the lie that it takes a village to raise a child when you had a village in the last 20 years. So now the village itself, what you dream of, is shooting and killing at each other. I went to St. Paul to St. Thomas, what's his name, Pastor Thomas's church, Mount Olivet. I said, I need your church. They're shooting too many girls in St. Paul. I need to be able to talk to the gang members and see what's going on. He said, Spike, I can give you the church, but everybody says that, but they never bring them. Will you give me the church? I'll bring them. I went to St. Paul and had them brothers come to that church. The main question after all that talking, first of all, he got excited and decided to give them lunch. I said, they need to eat. He fed them. I said to them this question now. Why is it you're shooting so many girls? Mr. Moss, no disrespect to you, but girls get shot too. Not girls shot your mama, girls shot your sister, girls shot at you. Just a simple expression, girls get shot too. We've lost our way. We have no spiritual foundation. We have very little family foundation. The children are in the streets like animals. They are dying like animals. If you know Pastor Griffin, when they passed that body up at his church for the last time, One young man stopped in front of that casket and stabbed that body with a Jim Bowie knife repeatedly, hollering, "Die, nigga, die." Reverend McAfee called me. "I think there's going to be a problem in my church." I went up there. He pointed out 8 guys in the balcony. I went and got him. "Why are you here?" "The nigga we came to kill is in this church and we're going to kill him here." Billy Russell, president of Black Baptist Convention, called me. "I think they're going to tear up my church." I went over there, all the colors in the church acting like they own and run the church. "If you want this funeral, set your behind down and let him do this funeral, or we can leave now." McAfee called again. I got the microphone. When I got there, all the people with any gang go downstairs. The funeral stops right now until we get ordered. I'm telling you, there's nothing about our history, our culture, they acknowledge or understand. Now, to wrap it up, please understand, any of us who was here, you remember the exploitation movies when all this madness started, where we were on camera calling each other nigger in every movie. We were selling drugs with pride in our community and driving Cadillacs. We were beating our women and calling them bitches, but we didn't say nothing. We talked about how good the movie was. And then rap came after hip hop. Rap started calling our women bitches again. And "Bitch better get me my money." And we listening and we singing and we bringing it in our mind and we letting it play in our car while our babies is in our car. We are living that reality of total madness. We're in the living room with the devil, and we the only one that don't know we living with him while we hollering Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much for your wisdom, for your passion, for your love for community, and your righteous anger, because it is righteous. We were born and created as divine. And when people forget their divinity, their humanity, that is what happens. And so I wouldn't be a good psychologist if I didn't sit at the throne of my God. I wouldn't be a good psychologist if I didn't have everlasting hope that what we learned we can unlearn, that there is hope for turning it around, or you wouldn't have used more than 40 years of your life to help people change theirs. So as we move on, I took the stick back. I'm going to pass it to Sister Brenda. Hopefully she'll pass it to Dr. Oliver. I think Lisa may be trying to get back in, and maybe even John Turnipseed. So I'm going to pass it quickly to Sister Brenda, and I'm just going to give you that stick because you've been fighting your life too, as an educator, to let children know that they have value.
I'm taking in Brother Moss, so give me a time to digest that because it's a lot of truth. And it goes back a long way, even when Al and I were growing up in Kansas City, but it wasn't as profound. So I'm going to pass it over to Oliver, and I need to take a few minutes to soak it in. Plus, I have to write about this. That was profound. He put it in a box, and I'm going to have to open it slowly because it was a lot. So I'm going to pass it over.
Before Dr. Williams takes the talking stick, I'm going to ask Kelvin in the background, if you can, please resend links to John Turnipseed and to Lisa. Is there anybody else we're expecting in? Dr. B? So those two, if you have their emails, try to send them the link again and reach out to them to bring them back into the studio. So I'll pass the talking stick over to Dr. Williams.
You know, one of the things that I think about, I've been doing work in prisons, and I had a project called Safe Return, and we've been working with people for over a period of time with folks around violence that they experienced and that some men did, and some men had to sort of reflect on their behavior and then try to figure out a way to be able to renew themselves associated with that. And then we did that project in North Minneapolis where we interviewed a lot of adults who were mentors, but also young men and young women about their experiences. And one of the things that I got from listening to people was the fact that they weren't feeling especially comfortable in their environment. That all of them had experiences where they felt that the environment wasn't safe, and what they went to is they went to gangs as a consequence of their lack of comfort. And but also what they learned from the gang too was ways that you handle that, and that you handle that by not seeing people as your support. You saw people as your enemy, and you had to respond to them in such a way. So the question is, what can happen to be able to turn that around? And talking to some of the people, I'm thinking about a brother named Purnell, who lived in Oregon, but then he moved to Atlanta, and both he and his wife had spent time in prison and doing breaking the law in different ways. And what they talked about was getting an assessment of themselves, and then trying to figure out how to change the way that they saw themselves, and also the way that they needed to change the way that they interacted in the community. You know, Purnell talked about how he ended up doing damage to the community, but in reflection, he had to uh, examine how he uh, did damage to the community, and how he had to find ways to heal people in the community. So he started doing work. He and Ashley, his wife, ended up doing things to be able to uh, help to renew uh, uh, the challenges that they felt like that they had visited on the people in the community. There's a guy that killed his best friend, and he was gonna go down to try to kill the guy that murdered his best friend. But the thing that was fascinating about it was that he ended up not doing it, but he went to prison for attempted murder. And when he ended up doing things to reassess himself in terms of his uh, not only his substance abuse but his criminal behavior, and he started working with kids that were in prison as well as kids that were in the community, he ended up being a mentor for the guy that tried to kill him and killed his partner. So there's something about uh, dealing with that environment that a lot of young people talk about, where they don't feel safe, and that they trying to find a place where they can feel supported and feel connections with other people, where they feel that, and that they see those people sometimes as enemies, but they learn to see them as people that are supportive of them on in a dimension. And we've got to find ways to be able to create other places where they don't learn those lessons from that crowd. They have to learn them from other places that are more supportive, and that they feel safe, but they also find another way to be able to engage with people, and that they also have to reflect on the issues associated with that trauma. And what I've learned with the different people that we've interacted with, over the years, is that all of them have learned that lesson in some way to be able to turn it around and to be supportive of one another and do it within the community. I think of Warren Edwards as the brother that lived in the community, and he did some things and to try to develop approaches to change the way that people interacted. And Warren has passed away, but he was in the Twin Cities community. But one of the things that I had to ask Warren, I said, well, Warren, what was the lesson that you learned to be able to change and also to forgive yourself for the damage that you felt like you visited? He talked about the activities that he did to try to um, heal the community. And that was something that was real important to him. And every time he did an act, that was a way that he could forgive himself for what he had done in the past. But it was also, and I think also Mother Atum. Mother Atum tells stories about her experiences living in an environment that she said, may have produced violence. And the thing that was so wise about her comments to me, she says, if I lived in an environment that created this behavior, I can create an environment that changes it, so we don't continue to produce this type of thing. And that's why the Cultural Wellness Center, it exists, because of what her experiences were, but also what she felt like she could do to really recreate environments that are supportive and that can create change. And that's what we need to do, is that we need to find ways to be able to catch people in places that are more proximal to their living experience, and that people feel like they can reach out, where the young people will know where to go and they can find support, and to be able to create it, but also change their behavior, where they don't feel as though they got to strike out to harm somebody. That what they can do is that they can find other places to be able to feel safe and supported, and learn. I have a friend named William Oliver that's in Indiana, and one of the things that William talks about is the street codes that we some of us who may not look like we grew up in that environment, but grew up in that environment. And there are different ways that we've learned how to interact in the world, and that we learn one set of rules for how we need to behave towards people, but you got to relearn the ways that we interact, and not by those street codes. Got to learn how to act differently. And Ms. Brenda, I saw that you were trying to say something, but you're on mute right now.
I was just trying to give an amen. Are you asking me or Brenda?
I was asking Brenda, but
okay, go ahead. I'm just saying amen, Brenda.
I just wanted to know, how do we get these resources in the schools? How do we get the training to the 87% white teachers that are unable to relate not only to our kids' problems, but their environment? We don't know what's going on with the kids in the morning before they get to school, what trauma they're going through to get to school. And then they get in school and they wave their hand and the white teacher ignores them. So we've got all of these layers. 37 years in education, Dr. Williamson. So I've seen it on both sides. And I've seen it with all the racism that both of my daughters have gone through. I'm talking from fighting the Klan and the whole bit. I mean, intense racism. So my children have had this, and I've seen my students have it. My concern now with COVID, with Blacks not taking the vaccination, with how far our kids are behind. They would log in and it would be seat time and there would be no academic enrichment going on at all. So we've got all of these things built up, plus they might have lost a friend to violence in all of these numbers that Spike had rolled out. It's a lot to deal with, but where do we get started now that our kids are back in school?
Well,
go ahead.
One of the things that I think is that you got to bring people who understand what the reality is to be able to bring the message. Because, you were talking about our kids, but it's not like we haven't lived it too.
Oh, tell me about it.
And so the thing is that when you go to places where people don't know that reality and that truth, you got to be able to bring people who understand it. and to be able to tell that truth.
I mean, I'm 74 years old, and Spike just shocked me, and I have a master's in African American studies. And I can't believe that we've come from when I graduated from graduate school in 74 to where we are now with the statistics that he just rolled out. I mean,
so let me throw this back to Spike, because I wanted you to go from where you left it to what you think are the solutions. What are the strategies?
Yeah.
Because I think we're not talking about, no matter how bad the situation looks, we're not talking about giving up. We're not talking about surrendering. We are talking about what do we have to do right now. And I see John Turnipseed is joining. I'm going to probably go beyond the 1 o'clock deadline, so letting Kelvin know we'll keep this conversation going. Spike, what do you think? What is the solution? What do we do to reclaim, to reconnect, and to move forward?
Well, I have said to Black men in the last 4 or 5 years, I've made myself clear. When the men stand up, the boys will sit down. The men have not made up their mind to stand up. When I talked to Lisa Clemens and them, and I told them the importance of a mother's group, it was to help them be better women and better mothers. When you have no organization, so they understand when they go in their boy's bedroom and find a gun, you don't bring the gun to the boy, what's this doing in my house, and hand it back to him. When you find the dope, you don't tell him I don't want this dope in my house and hand it back to him. You have to have a women's organization to teach them how to be better mothers and better women, because they're the majority of these kids. Now, if I might make myself clear, I had a head start on it when I did that 39 years, 3 prisons a week in the state of Minnesota. I did all those Black groups all those years to put our men in a better position in their mind about their responsibility and what they owe the community. We got to go back in those prisons. We got to put together the groups that speak to the junior high schools and the high schools about we want and what is our position. We have to go in the church and speak to the mothers and the children that they bring. What is our position? And teach them to carry forth our values. We no longer have values on the table that are respected. I would dare say, and I don't know all y'all's personal business, but I would dare say, none of you have never been allowed to talk back to your mother. I would dare say, never allowed to cuss at your mother. Never allowed to call your mother out of her name. I would dare say, none of you were ever allowed to intimidate your mother or strike your mother. This generation will now kill their mother. So we have to teach, starting at the root of what Mahmoud did with us. Black history has to return our values. We don't have to rebuild the wheel. We got to do what brought us this far. These kids don't have it. Hell, they got mothers that can't cook. Hey, they in the kitchen burning Kool-Aid. You don't cook Kool-Aid. You understand what I'm saying to you? They don't have the basics that they need. It's gone. We just have to rebuild the basics. I was going to show y'all something, and I don't know if you can see it. But on this paper here, no, you can't see it. But from here to here, that's shot fired in North Minneapolis. Down here is the South Side. But on this piece of paper, all the way across, all the way down, that's shots fired now. That's shot fired now. I'm sorry you can't see them. We're killing at a pace that when I said they might have to kill themselves out, that's how fast they're going. This is also I've been at Turning Point for 42 years. When we started, it was alcohol. Later on, it was heroin, and then it was cocaine, and then finally crack came. You have a generation of young people now in Turning Point who take all the drugs you can name and mix them up together. So we have to have a youth chemical program. Most of the kids armed and dangerous are also drugged out, not just mentally ill. Many of the gangs take advantage of the ones who they can see the mental illness and hand him the gun or her. So everything we do can be taught in school and church. Our biggest failure, Al, and I'm not saying this behind no preacher's back, it's just common sense. We should have did like the Jews years ago on Saturday and open those churches so black boys and girls could learn what it is to be an African American in America. Jews taught what it is to be a Jew in their churches on Saturday. We have nothing but churches sitting there on Saturday with kids with empty minds as to who they are. It's just simple basics that a mother's love is what a child needs. Take it from him, and you got an armed, dangerous person. A mother does, not to pick on mothers, but I know personally, a mother's responsible for about 85% of all nurturing. A daddy's lucky if he puts in his 10%, let alone 15. But it's the mother that said, Al, button your shirt up like this. You got it buttoned up wrong. Al, put your shoes on like this. You got it on wrong. You got your shoe tied up wrong. Hold your fork like this, Al. Cut your meat. It's a mother. So when you destroy the mother, you destroy the people because that's the basis of our institution. We have learned as a people to hate ourselves so much. And the doctor said it best. We got to reteach. They can't stand what they look like. So anything that looks like them, they will kill it. Man, woman, or child. So we have to reteach. There's got to be a column in your paper every week to just teach the values and the importance of black women, of black mothers, of black babies, of black people, of a black neighborhood. And it's that kind of basic stuff that will win the day that we had, they don't have. You see what I'm saying? One of the lessons, at least 3 of you got. Our mothers gave us a first name and a middle name. It's usually associated with somebody they loved or a name they like the sound of. So when mama called you, she called you by your first name. Don't y'all remember that? Until you disappointed her, you heard the full name. When you heard the full name, you did not rush down the hallway to her. You were sliding your feet on the floor because game over. We had rules in the house. We knew what the rules were. Think about a woman wanting the baby to get off the couch. And instead of telling the baby, get off the couch, get your black MO son off that such and such couch. That's how she talked to him. And in the process, she would also destroy that daddy, whether he's a good daddy or bad daddy. Because when she tells him to get down, didn't I tell you to get down, not do that, nigga? So-and-so, you just like your so-and-so daddy, you ain't either. You see what I'm saying? We got to teach that value. We got to teach that love. We got to bring back our history, our culture. Our women, where is their cooking class when they don't know how to cook? How do you, in 2001, send so many black babies into school unbathed, hair uncombed, face unwashed, didn't brush their teeth? How do you do that? Our mother said, in my time, poor don't mean dirty. Poor don't mean nasty. You fix your clothes. They taught you how to iron your clothes, wash your clothes. And that's what we got a generation don't know none of that. None of that. I was with Peter Hayden when Hennepin County came. They was going to give him some money for venereal disease. They said if they'd have brought it out, they would have been accused of being racist. They said, but in the black community, black women have now ran past the white man with syphilis. In the black community, black women have now ran past white men with AIDS. In the black community, there's chlamydia epidemic. And that's why they wanted to give him money, because they didn't want to have to say it public and be attacked. But if you don't even know to go to the doctor, then you're going to spread it. The average black woman in that study that was brought to me and Peter Hayden in that meeting had 7 people they had to find per woman that had been hit with that disease. We just got to rebuild our love, our respect, and teach. We got to teach in that paper. We got to teach on KMOJ. We got to teach in them churches. And we got to teach in school with teams of men, women who remember what mama and daddy taught you and say it to these people, because they have none of that information. It's not as big as you think. It's about what's in your mind and your heart that's got to be given to them that they've never had. Do you realize they're growing up without a dance because you can't bring them together? They can't have a Friday or Saturday night. They can't even have a concert because they'll shoot at each other. You can't bring them to church. They keep shooting at the churches. They just did it at Bishop Howe's church when he tried to bury that child, and then went to the cemetery and started shooting again after shooting 2 people up at the church. So when you look at that and the fact that they don't care about age, if we don't correct them, and this is to Lisa's point of things I've shared with her, think about a mama and a grandmother in an apartment building in Brooklyn Center, and a 2-year-old gets shot. And they tell the police they don't know who shot the baby, and they don't know where the gun is at. I have looked at case after case of these women saying they don't know, they didn't see the car, they didn't see what nationality it was, and we got all these babies dead, and we don't have enough human decency to tell who's killing our babies. It's not that big a deal. We just need to teach. We need to open our mouths, say what we learn, say what we know to a people, and don't assume they know. Say it to them, because you'll be shocked how many don't know what we talking about here.
You know, one thing I think about though.
Oliver Williams, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, Resma said something, several years ago, and we were talking about working with youth, and we were coming up with some examples about I think the challenges of dealing with youth. And one of the things that he said was, if you can't talk to somebody about the small things, you can't talk to them about the big things. So there's something about relationships that we have to develop with our kids and within the community, for them to be able to listen to what you're trying to say, and for them to have faith in what you're trying to say to them too. And so the question becomes, how do you do something where you have conversations with them, where they trust what you have to say, and rather than us talking at them?
Well, let me respond to that, Al.
Go ahead, please.
It's a good question.
I talked to gang kids from one end of America to the other when I did gang summits. Communication was possible because they were at a level where you could talk to them. You now have a generation, you now got to make up your mind as you look at them, is this child normal? You got to look at them and say, is this child on something? Can this child understand what I'm saying to him? Because in a moment, he can shoot you. So you can take the chance, and you should take the chance, but know the risk is the reason we can't get people to take the chance, because he's stoned out of his mind with a pistol. He's mentally ill with the pistol, and he's mad at us. Let me give you an example, brother. Peter Hayden called me one day. He said, Spike, there's some problems out here. Young boys are jumping on black men. I go down there to Irving and Broadway right behind Peter's, and I stand back so I could see them. Every time the bus stopped, they jumped out and beat black men. So I waited till I could see one, your point, to communicate with. I asked him to round them all up and follow me back around the block to Turning Point. Peter then gave me a room. I set him down. What are y'all doing? We were sitting there today, Brother Spike, and we decided we're going to get even with them niggas that was daddies and left us, and we just going to beat the hell out of them today. There was so much blood in the snow, it looked like red mud. They had beat that many black men that day. I said, this is not your daddy. And I'm sorry about what your daddy did, but these are men getting off the bus, coming from work, tired and worn out. They didn't even connect with them being black. They didn't even connect with them being somebody else's father. They put in their mind, today's the day they're going to get theirs. So when you go at them, you won't have the opportunity that I had back in the day when I went totally across America and did gang summits. I saved thousands of lives, even here. This kid has had less than all of us ever. Less instruction, less love, less motivation. He can walk away from school at 13 and don't nobody care. Think about you walking out your mama's house at 7, 8 years old and you ain't got permission. When your mama say you can go outside or not, when your mama say front yard or backyard, how you walk out the house and come back when you want? How you go to school half naked and your mama see it and don't put no clothes on you? So when you get into this, it should be that simple, but let me tell you, it will not be. You just got to be that determined to keep pushing the message, is what the doctor's saying, because if we don't, we gave up. We have to keep going, even though the odds are stacked against us. All I'm giving you is where we really at. And so you have to gear yourself up for where you're really at. And then please remember this. The gun he's carrying, it's a split second and he's took your life. They're extremely high powered and they will empty in seconds. So you got to have all of that in your mind as you approach them. I was asked by Pastor Patterson, he was burying a gang member in St. Paul, and I'm on the stage. Brother Spike, you need to come outside. We got a problem. There's a brother with a hoodie across the street. Why are you here with a gun? Because some ends in there want to kill me, so I got my gun to fight them back when I get in there. He could have went home. He thought he had to go into church with the gun. That's his mentality, and spray everybody innocent in the church. So I'm saying to you, we have no choice, but I'm trying to tell you what we up against is not normal for a kid to do that many drugs and mix it with alcohol daily. The other thing is there's a drugs, when you look at the opium itself, it's dropping 147 people a day and they still won't quit.
That's
and
right.
then you got a drug out here, you're stepping forward, all of a sudden your body freezes. Well, what if it freezes while you got your hand on the trigger? You will empty the gun at everybody you see around. Your chief in St. Paul told me 3 weeks ago, they came to a home in St. Paul. He found 130 shells on the ground outside. He found 75 shells inside. That's the kind of gun he got that goes off like a zipper. So I'm just saying, yes, you're right. But we got to find the people with the courage to go at those children and speak to them anyway. Can you run the risk? Do you want to run the risk? Becomes the question. Do you have the heart? You have the courage? Becomes the question. But because he's going to come at you in a very savage way. I've seen children with 15, 16 shots in them. It's a normal behavior, even on the ground.
Let me jump in here because I hear what you're saying, Brother Spike, and I know you're not lying. I was working at one of the schools, like high school for recording arts, and they had a lot of kids. They have a very non-traditional learning environment for kids who want to be rap artists or do spoken word. Those kids go to that school, and many of them have failed at other environments that they succeed in that space because it's not conventional. They get their learning in a different way. And I remember one day, one of the kids was in a gang. And he came to me and said, Dr. B, I'm in a gang, and I don't want to go home because the boys have already told me they're going to beat me up or kill me on the way home. And so when I talked to him, I noticed that he'd been having that problem a long time, and there was nobody he could say what was happening to. He couldn't talk to anybody. He couldn't go home and be safe with his mama or dad or whoever the adults were who were supposed to be in his life because they were all wrapped up in the same gang and the same situation, nowhere to turn. And one of the things that hit me that day, and I started thinking, when we get all these gunshots, when we get babies shot in the head and all the things that happen, those are psychological, those lead to trauma and psychological problems. But it can happen over and over again. And do you know, I don't get a referral. At the African American Child Wellness Institute, people go where babies, 4-year-old babies, see, like Philando Castile, seeing folks killed. And they say, oh, they too young, it ain't going to bother them. Even those who go out to the scenes don't think about this might be a mental health issue or this might lead to one. So we can cut it off at the pass. We wait till it grows and grows and grows and gets to be a space that is out of control. And it can happen as early as 3, and that we don't get them till they're 13. So that's 10 years of mental health support a child could have had, even if his mama is raggedy or his daddy is raggedy. 10 years that nothing's happened, and the teachers see them acting up, call them being bad. They don't see them as sad. They say you got ADD or BAD. They think they don't understand your SAD. So they refer you for discipline and put you on the jail track. It's a conduct problem instead of emotional problem. So I'm going to even take the stage a little deeper. Last time, sister, I see Lily in here with us. She said that parents need to stop doing drive-bys. How you doing? Okay, good. Keep on going. They need to sit down with their kids and spend time with them. And when they sit with the kids, I think as a psychologist, I know kids can't hear but 3 messages. Grown-ups can't hear but 4. So when we sit down with them, we start lecturing. At some point, it starts sounding like, So we even have to teach parents how to communicate to brains that aren't developed. So all of this happens. And I'm double dog daring that people who go out to these crime scenes, I double dog dare you to bring the children for counseling, to get them hooked up. The only way they get counseling is to get them behind bars. And then they don't get it well there. So I'm just telling you, that's our challenge. Spike has described the problem. All of us on this panel, we are the solution. But do we all get to coalesce around the same problem, except when we're talking about it? Do we have an integrated system? They talk about that in health system. What about an integrated community system? When you see that problem at church, you see it in the streets, get them to some help. And it's not just you that holds the answers. And it's not just the parents who hold the answer. I told you they don't know how to talk to their kids. So we got to work together. And this is a great challenge about how do we correct what we're seeing? How do we help heal our babies?
But doctor,
and I don't know what happened to John Turnipseed, because he was going to come here and talk about mad dads and how he's struggling. Because last I looked, he was still in the waiting room an hour ago, still trying to get the word out to fathers and young men. Just exactly what Brother Spike is talking about, but what kind of programs they have for them, how they can help them. And I was hoping we could get him in. I don't know if he's even still on anymore.
He had to leave at 2
I'll
o'clock.
jump off so he can get in. Oh, he had to go.
I got a question for the doctor. I got a question for the doctor, because the point that she's bringing up, that point there is as old as the beginning of our migration from down south. Now, what I mean by that is when mental illness would show up in our children in the South, and I'm from Missouri.
I'm from Texas.
We would say out of our mouth, ain't nothing wrong with Junebug. So once you decide ain't nothing wrong, Junebug will never, ever get any help.
That's
and
right.
We are still there is what I'm asking you, because I'm saying we are still there. We don't want nobody to think we crazy. So we ain't going to get the baby no help. We'd rather just make fun and say he cray rather than get him some help. Now, that's how we were in the South. And many of us came to the North with that same value. If some mental illness show up, it's embarrassing. We're not going to acknowledge it. You ain't getting no help.
Yeah. And that's why instead of talking to mental anything, Black folks don't even like to hear the word mental health. we got to talk about being well. What that means to be well. And we know Uncle Bubba ain't so well. We know you don't give him no 2 beers. So we know wellness, because that's our African center. Our original state is to be well. So let's maybe modify our vocabulary that's why my organization isn't called African American Child Mental Health Center. It's called African American Child Wellness Center.
Great.
Because wellness is a state. It's a lifelong condition. It's not like a condition or an incident. It's maintaining your wellness throughout your life in all areas of your life. So when we do programs like Project Marua, where we teach parents to show respect to themselves, their communities, and their children, we are seeing parents modeling and teaching the behaviors. But guess what? We have to teach the parents before they can model it. So I just want to say we need to promote wellness. And whoever needs a stick, I'm passing it on, because I know we've gone. I like to give it to Lily. She just got here. If she could just take a minute. Do you mind, Brother Al, if I just give it to Lily? She is a kid.
We'll let Lily close it out.
There you go. Here you go, Lily.
Really good to see you again. Yeah.
All right.
We can't hardly see Lily.
So,
you see in the fog?
Just when
There she
now we
is.
can see.
you can't see me.
We can see you.
Yeah.
Perfect.
There you go. Better, sort of. All right. The whole entire part of just wellness in general really is interesting to me. I believe in it as well. Wellness is a big thing that not only children need, but also their parents as well. And everyone in the community. I feel like it's a very big staple part of our community. If it's going to be great, then that needs to be a big part of it. I believe that not only parents need to be reaching out, but also children. Um, Even if you want to keep communication with your family, and you always want to stay close. Um, I'm the oldest on my dad's side. I'm the oldest child on my dad's side, and so I really am the wrangler of all the children. Keeping community and keeping unity is my number one thing that I've kept throughout my whole entire family. Um, and I really just appreciate having that opportunity to be that way with my family and having, communication skills with my family as well. So,
Thank you, Lily.
Spike, Lily is my niece, and she's Leon Rankin's granddaughter. Just so you know,
What?
yeah, that's Leon
Leon?
Rankin's granddaughter, right? So, Lily,
Oh, that's a memory for me, ain't it?
everybody knows
Leon.
your family, and you come from a strong line of leaders,
Yes.
right? And so we love
Yeah.
you for that. Listen, we are way over time, but this has been a wonderful conversation. Dr. B, I would like to continue this next week because we didn't get John Turnipseed in, and there are other people that should be in this conversation, but this is rich, and this is one of the times that, thanks to the clarity of Brother Spike, we've peeled it back, right, down to the bare bones of the challenges that we have as human beings and the challenge that is uh, before us to retain our humanity, the environment that is encouraging us to disregard our humanity and to be something we are not, and that is murderers of ourselves, right? And so I think this is a conversation we have to keep with and build on. And Dr. B, I'll connect with you later on, but I want to thank you. I call him the General, Spike Moss, for all you have done and all you continue to do, for the courage that you epitomize, that you embody and reflect in everything you do and everything that you say. And I thank Dr. Oliver Williams for leadership, service, and work, and Dr. B, obviously, for your vision and building of a system and a platform that we can have this discussion. Thanks to Lily and thanks to my colleague Brenda. Spike, you haven't met Brenda before you got on. I told people, and I don't mind telling, she's a fellow Missourian. Spike is from southern Missouri. I think Cape Girardeau, Spike, or
No, I'm from a little town called Paris.
Paris,
I'm from a
Missouri.
little town called Paris, right there between Hannibal and Macon. Right there.
Brenda and I went to kindergarten together in Kansas City.
What?
So
At Booker T. Washington, Spike, on
she
23rd and Prospect.
she's really old.
I am old.
But I'll tell you something. After I listened to the doctor talk about all of this, with all this stuff I did, Al, I got to hurry up and jump on her couch and unload.
There we go. There we go. Well, that's
That's real for everyone.
I want to thank you
I gotta
because
unload,
I
boy.
learned a lot.
I got to unload on your couch. Because I'm
You're
telling you,
welcome anytime.
the misery is overwhelming.
Yeah.
But Al, I'm going to say something to you, and this is the truth.
Go ahead.
I went to speak all the preachers up there at Bishop Howe's church about a month ago to get them to do that 21 days.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth of the matter is, on this issue, I've been in group after group of white people. On Monday, I speak to the whole city council of Brooklyn Park. I had already spoke to all them white boys that were police in Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park. You're the first Black person to want to hear about our condition.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you all, this distinguished panel. I'm so honored, and I love you all so much for what you do and what you bring. And I guess next week when we hook up again for the Healing Circle, we'll be talking about solutions.
There we
We
go.
talked
Yeah,
about
getting
the
on your
problem.
couch.
Next
Getting
week
on
is
your couch.
solution. I'll sit on my couch that day, and everybody can pretend they're on it.
I want to get well. I want to get well. I'm tired of being mad.
Me too. We all do. Thank you,
With
Brother
that,
Al. You got the
with that,
floor. You got
thank you all, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
at the Healing Circle. Bye.
Let's see.